Welcome to the sleeping part. Find a comfortable position now. Let yourself settle into it fully, the way a stone settles into sand. Let your shoulders come down. Let your jaw soften. Let your eyes close, if they're not closed already. And let your breathing slow and deepen and find its own quiet rhythm, with nothing to hurry. Tonight, a forgotten story from the Mahabharata, the tale of a king who had everything, who lost it all to a single game of dice, and a wife whose love would not let him stay lost. It is a long story and a gentle one, and it ends well, so there is nothing in it you need to hold on to, and nothing you need to follow closely. You may drift in and out, you may lose the thread and find it again, or not find it at all. None of that matters now. There is nothing you need to do but lie still and breathe and let the words come to you slowly, one after another, like soft waves arriving on a shore in the dark. Let them carry you down, gently, a little further with each breath, towards sleep. Whenever you're ready, we begin. Long ago, before the time we can remember, in the green and well-watered country of Nishada, there lived a king named Nala. He was the kind of king the old stories loved to begin with. He was young, and he was handsome, and he carried his good looks lightly, the way a tall tree carries its height, without pride, without thinking much about it at all, simply being what he was. He was gentle with those who were weak, and patient with those who were slow, and steady in the middle of trouble, the way a deep river is steady even when the wind frets the surface of it. And he loved horses. This is worth knowing about Nala, because it matters later. There was no one in all the white land who understood horses as he did. He could look at a nervous animal and know, somehow, exactly what it feared. He could lay a hand on a horse's neck and feel its heart slow under his palm. When Nala took the reins of a chariot, people would come out of their houses and stand at the edge of the road simply to watch the dust rise behind the wheels, and the horses run as though they were glad to be running, and the king sitting easy and unhurried at the center of all that speed, as calm as a man sitting by his own hearth. The people of Nishada loved him in the plain and undramatic way that people love a good ruler. The rains came when they should. The fields were heavy, the markets were full, and quarrels were few, and the old people said they could not remember a better time. Under King Nala, the country slept easily at night, the way a child sleeps when it knows the grown-ups are awake and near. And the country itself was a lovely one in those days. It was a land of slow green rivers and broad fields, of mango groves and tanks of still water, where the lotuses opened in the morning and closed again at dusk. In the spring the trees flowered all at once, and the air turned sweet and heavy. In the season of the rains, the whole land grew lush and dripping and brilliantly green, and the rivers ran full, and the frogs sang in the evenings. And in the cool, clear nights of winter, the stars came down close and bright over the sleeping fields. Through all the turning of the seasons, the people went about their lives, planting and harvesting, marrying and raising children, keeping their small festivals and their old customs, under a king who watched over them and asked little of them and gave them peace. It was the kind of quiet, ordinary, well-ordered happiness that no one notices while they have it, and that everyone remembers afterward as a kind of golden age. Nala's own days passed gently and well. He rose early and saw to the business of the kingdom, hearing the people who came to him, settling what needed settling, with patience and a fair mind. He spent his afternoons among his horses, which was where he was happiest, and in the evenings he walked, or sat quietly, or played, now and then, an easy game of dice with the men of his court, a small pleasure at the end of a long day, nothing more, or so it seemed. He was content. He had everything a man could reasonably want, and he knew it, and he was grateful for it. in the unthinking way of someone who has never yet had anything taken from him. Nala had only one weakness, and at first it seemed such a small one that no one thought about it at all. Nala loved the game of dice. He loved the click and the tumble of them, the little hush before they came to rest, the small bright flare of winning. It was a harmless pleasure in those days. A king is allowed his pleasures. We will come to the dice in time. For now, simply hold the fact of it gently in the back of your mind, the way you might notice a single cloud far off on an otherwise clear evening, and think nothing of it. That is Nala. Now let us go a long way west, across many rivers and many days of traveling, to another country and another palace, and someone he had never met. In the country of Vidarbha, there lived a princess named Damayati. She was the daughter of a king named Bhima, and I will say at once that this is not the famous Bhima of the Great War, the strong one with the mace. This is a different and quieter Bhima, an older king, a gentle ruler, who had longed for children through many empty years before his prayers were answered. When at last his children came, Damayanti was the brightest of them and the dearest, and his whole heart went out to her. She was beautiful, but that is too small and too ordinary a word, and the people who actually saw her always found that the word failed them. Travelers who had passed through Vidarbha and seen the princess would try, later, in other cities, to describe her, and they would begin and then stop and shake their heads and fall silent, and at last say only small and clumsy things. They said that when she came into a room, the lamps seemed to lean toward her, as flowers lean toward the sun. They said that to see her even once was to feel, for a moment, that the world was a kinder and more finely made place than you had thought it was. They could not do better than that. Beauty like hers does not fit into sentences, so they gave up trying and simply said, "You would have to see her." And then, remembering, they would go quiet. Now here is the strange and tender thing, the thing the whole story grows out of. Nala and Damayanti had never met. They lived a journey of many weeks apart, in different countries, under different stars. Neither had ever seen the other's face, and yet, slowly, without quite meaning to, each of them began to fall in love with the other. It happened through the travelers. Merchants and minstrels and wandering holy men came to Nala's court, as they came to every court, and they brought news from the far places and the gossip of distant palaces. And among all the other news they spoke of the princess of Vidarbha, of her grace, of her goodness, of a beauty that made grown men forget what they had been about to say. And Nala listened, and the idea of her settled somewhere inside him and would not leave. And in the same way, in the same season, travelers came to Damayanti's court and spoke of the king of Nishada, of his gentleness, of his courage, of the way wild horses grew quiet under his hands, of a young king who was everything a king should be and kind besides. And Damayanti listened, and the idea of him settled inside her too, and would not leave. So there they were, two people, a world apart, each in love with someone they had never seen, each carrying the thought of the other through the long, ordinary hours of the day, the way you might carry a tune you cannot stop humming, a tune that comes back to you when you are doing other things. Each of them grew a little quiet. Each of them began to sit alone in gardens in the evening, looking toward a country they could not see, over the rims of the hills, where the light went down. They were, both of them, a little lovesick and a little lonely, and neither of them knew what to do about it, or even quite knew what it was that ailed them. And there, for a while, it might have stayed, two lonely people, far apart, each thinking of a stranger. The world is full of loves that never find their way out of one person's heart and into another's. This one might have been such a love, but it was not, because of a bird. Let your breath slow now, and grow even, and we will see what the world did next. One evening, In the cool after the heat of the day, Nala was walking alone in the gardens of his palace. These were old gardens, planted by kings before him, long avenues of trees, and quiet pools with lotus closing for the night, and grass kept soft and short, and the smell of jasmine coming and going on the air as the breeze turned. Nala walked there often now, in the evenings, alone, thinking, as he so often did these days, of the princess he had never seen, and feeling the particular ache of it, which was not entirely an unpleasant ache, but which gave him no rest. And on the grass before him, that evening, stood a flock of swans. They were beautiful birds, great and white, with wings like folded drifts of snow, and here and there, along the edges of their feathers, a touch of gold, as though they had brushed against the sunset on their way down to earth. They moved over the lawn slowly, unbothered, dipping their long necks, and Nala, on a gentle and idle impulse, the kind of impulse that changes a life without announcing that it is going to, stepped softly across the grass and reached out and caught one of them in his two hands. The bird did not struggle. It turned its head and looked at him with one dark eye, and then it spoke. "King Nala," said the swan, in a voice like water moving under ice, "do not harm me. Let me go, and I will do you a service worth far more than the life of one bird. I will fly from here to the country of Vidarbha. I will find the Princess Damayanti, and I will speak to her of you so truly and so well that from that hour she will never again think of any man in all the world but you." You can imagine how Nala's heart moved at that. He opened his hands at once. "Go then," he said softly, "and thank you." And he stepped back and let the bird rise. The swans went up together off the lawn, all at once, a single white cloud lifting into the darkening sky, their wings making a sound like many soft hands clapping far away. They circled once over the palace, and then they set their course, and they flew west, across the many rivers, across the dark forests, across the sleeping countryside, all through the night and into the next day, until at last they came down, tired and graceful, into the gardens of the palace of Vidarbha, far away. And there, as it happened, the Princess Damayanti was walking with her companions, a whole crowd of young women, in the cool of their own evening. When the swans came down among them, the young women laughed in delight and scattered across the lawn, each chasing after one of the lovely birds, the way you might chase something beautiful, simply for the joy of being near it. And the bird that Damayanti followed led her, gently, cleverly, a little apart from the others, around a hedge, into a quiet corner of the garden where no one else could hear. And then it stopped, and turned, and spoke to her. "Princess Damayanti," it said, "far from here, in the country of Nishada, there is a king. His name is Nala, and among all the men who walk the earth, there is no one like him. He is gentle, and he is brave, and he is beautiful. Beautiful as the very idea of beauty, beautiful the way a thing is beautiful in a dream, that you cannot quite describe when you wake. You, princess, among all women, and he among all men. If the two of you were ever joined, it would be like joining the moon to the night sky. Your goodness would have somewhere to rest, and so would his. I have seen him. I am telling you the truth." Damayanti stood very still while the bird spoke, and her heart beat hard and quick, because the bird was naming, out loud in the garden, the very thing she had been carrying in secret for so long. When it had finished, she could hardly find her voice, but at last she said simply, "Then say the same of me to Nala. Tell him what you have told me. Let him know." And the swan promised that it would, and it rose, and gathered its flock, and flew back across the many rivers to Nishada, and found the king, and told him everything. Told him that the princess had gone pale and quiet at his name, that her heart had turned toward him as surely as his had turned toward her. After that, Damayanti was not the same. The thought of Nala which had been a soft and distant and bearable thing, became now a clear and constant and almost unbearable one. She could not turn her mind from it. She ate little. She slept poorly, lying awake in the warm dark, looking at nothing. She would sit for long hours at her window, looking east, toward a country she could not see, where a king she had never met was, perhaps, looking west. Her companions watched her with growing worry. They saw the princess they loved growing thin and quiet and far away, and they did not know what to do. At last they went, gently and respectfully, to her father the king, and they told him, as kindly as they could, that his daughter was no longer a child, that her heart had settled itself somewhere, the way a heart will, without asking permission, and that it was time for her to choose a husband, before she wasted away with longing. King Bhima was a wise man, and he loved his daughter, and he understood, and so he did what the great kings of those days did when a princess was ready to choose. He proclaimed a Swayamvara, and that word Swayamvara means simply the choosing for oneself. It was a gathering, a great assembly, to which all the kings and princes of the world would be invited, and there, before them all, the princess herself, with her own hand, would choose the man she wished to marry. No one would choose for her. The choice would be hers alone. And so King Bhima sent out his messengers in every direction, to every court near and far, carrying the invitation, "Come to Vidarbha. The Princess Damayati will choose a husband. Let all who wish to be considered come." Let the word travel now out along all the roads of the world, and let yourself sink a little deeper into the dark and the quiet, as, in palace after palace, kings begin to hear the news, and begin to make ready, and begin to set out. The roads of the world filled with travelers. From every direction they came, drawn toward Vidarbha, kings in their painted chariots, with banners snapping above them, and the dust of long journeys gray on their shoulders, princes riding hopeful and impatient, great lords with elephants swaying under canopies of silk, and trains of servants, and the whole bright apparatus of men who mean to be chosen. The roads that led to Vidarbha, that had been quiet country roads, were suddenly loud with wheels and hoofs and the talk of strangers, all of it flowing one way, like many small streams running down toward a single sea. It seemed, that season, as though the whole earth had turned itself toward one city and one young woman, and the choosing she was about to make. And what a sight those roads were in the days before the choosing. By night the travelers made their camps along the way, and their fires sprang up across the darkened country like fallen stars, hundreds of them, scattered over the hills and the river valleys, each one a little circle of light with kings and servants gathered around it. The smell of wood smoke and cooking drifted across the dark. Horses stamped and blew softly in the picket lines. Somewhere someone was always playing music, a flute or a drum carrying thin and sweet across the night air. And by day the roads filled again with color and motion. The painted chariots, the silk canopies, the elephants with their bells, the bright banners of 100 kingdoms, all mingled together and pointed the same way. Old enemies passed one another on the road and nodded, courteous for once, all of them bound on the same errand. The whole world, it seemed, had put on its finest and set out toward Vidarbha. And in the city itself, King Bhima's people had been working for weeks. They had raised a great hall for the choosing, a vast pillared space, open to the air, hung with garlands and bright cloths, its hundreds of pillars wound with flowers, its floors swept and strewn with petals, lamps without number waiting to be lit. They had prepared lodgings for the kings, and food for their countless followers, and stabling for the horses and the elephants. The city had not seen anything like it in living memory, and at the heart of all of it, quiet in her own rooms, while the great machine of the Swayamvara was built up around her, waited Damayanti, who cared nothing for the 100 kings on the roads, and thought only of one man, and wondered, in the long evenings, whether he would come. And the news rose higher than the roads. It rose, in the end, all the way up into heaven, for even the gods had heard of Damayanti. Word of her beauty had drifted up out of the world, the way the smoke of an evening fire drifts up into the sky, and it had reached the bright country of the gods, and there it had stirred even the great ones. And 4 of the greatest of them resolved to go down and attend the Swayamvara themselves. There was Indra, the king of the gods, the lord of the storm and the thunderbolt. There was Agni, the lord of fire, bright and hungry and ancient. There was Varuna, the lord of all the waters, of the rivers and the rain and the deep sea. And there was Yama, the lord of what comes at the end, the keeper of the dead, the most patient and the most certain of all the gods, who is not cruel, but who is never ever turned aside. These 4 came down out of heaven and onto the roads of the world, each of them thinking in his heart that surely it would be he whom the famous princess would choose. And on the road between the worlds, the 4 gods met a man walking. He was a king, on his way to the Swayamvara, like all the rest, tall and bright and so beautiful that even the gods, who are themselves beautiful beyond the telling, stopped on the road to look at him. It was Nala. He was traveling toward Vidarbha with his heart full of the princess he had still, even now, never seen, going to the choosing simply to be near her, hardly daring to hope, but unable to stay away. The 4 gods came down before him on the road and stood in his path, shining, and Nala stopped. And Indra, the king of the gods, spoke to him. King Nala, said Indra, you are known through all the world as a truthful man, and a truthful man keeps the promises he makes. We ask a thing of you. Will you promise to do it for us before you know what it is? Now this is a dangerous kind of promise to give, and you and I, listening from a safe distance, can see the trap in it. But Nala was open-hearted, and the gods were before him, and a request from a god is not a small thing to refuse. And so Nala, not yet knowing what he was agreeing to, gave his word. I will, he said. Whatever it is, I will do it. Tell me your wish. We are the gods, said Indra, gently, and we go, as you go, to the choosing of Damayanti. Each of us would have her for his own. This is what we ask of you. Go before us. Go into her chamber. We will see to it that you can, and carry to her our message. Tell her that Indra and Agni and Varuna and Yama all desire her, and that she should choose one of us, one of the gods, and not a mortal man. You can imagine what those words did to Nala. He had given his word freely, and a true man does not take his word back once it is given. And the thing he had promised to do, he understood it now, standing on the road, was to go to the very woman he loved, the woman he had crossed half the world to be near, and to ask her with his own mouth to marry someone else, and not merely someone else, to marry a god. His heart broke, quietly, there on the road in the space between one breath and the next. But he did not let it show, and he did not try to wriggle free of his promise. He bowed his head. I have given my word, he said, and I will keep it. I will carry your message. But tell me, how am I to enter her chamber? The inner palace of a princess is guarded day and night. No stranger passes. I will be stopped at the first door. You will not be stopped, said the gods. We will make it so that no door can hold you out, and no guard can see you come. And so it was. By the power of the gods, Nala walked into the inner palace of Vidarbha as though he were walking through morning mist. The doors did not hold him. The guards did not see him. He passed through the guarded halls, unseen and unhindered, his heart growing heavier with every step, until at last he came into the chamber of the princess herself. And there he saw her. He saw Damayanti, the woman he had loved for so long without ever having a face to set the love upon. and she was more than all the travelers had ever said, more than the swan had promised, more than the picture he had carried in the dark. For a long moment, neither of them moved, and neither of them spoke. She was astonished. A stranger, a beautiful stranger, had appeared in her guarded chamber as if out of the very air, and he was simply struck still, looking at her, drinking in the sight he had crossed the world for and had never thought to have. Then Damayanti found her voice and rose, trembling a little, and asked him who he was, this man who had come through locked doors and silent guards into the most private room in the kingdom. And Nala, keeping his promise even now, even when it cost him everything, told her the truth. I am Nala, he said, king of Nishada. I have come as a messenger, and the message is not my own. The gods Indra, Agni, Varuna, and Yama all desire you, and they have sent me to ask you to choose one of them, to choose a god, and not a mortal man. I gave them my word that I would tell you this. I have told you. That is all I came to do. And Damayanti listened to him, and then she said the thing that decided everything that followed. I have already chosen, she said, from the day a swan first spoke your name to me in my own garden. King Nala, it has been you, and only you. I do not want a god. I want you. Let the gods come. Let them be displeased. I do not care. At my Swayamvara, before all the world, I will choose you, and no one else. And then no fault can fall upon you for any promise you have made, because I will have chosen freely, of my own will, in the open, where everyone can see. Nala tried, gently, to argue with her. It was an honorable thing, and a hard thing, and it cost him to do it. But he tried. He told her she should not throw away a god for the sake of a mortal man, that the love of a god was no small thing to refuse, that she should think again. But Damayanti would not be moved, and she showed him the way out of the trap. Let him come to the Swayamvara, she said, as one suitor among the others. Let her choose him there, in the open hall, with the gods themselves standing as witnesses. Then his honor would be whole, for he would have delivered their message faithfully, and her heart would be whole too. And Nala, who loved her, and who could not in the end find it in himself to talk her out of loving him back, agreed. He left her then, the way he had come, unseen, and he returned to the four gods waiting on the road. And he told them, honestly, everything that had passed, that he had carried their message faithfully, word for word, and that the princess had set her heart on him, and would not be turned. He hid nothing. He did not pretend he had failed to deliver it. He did not pretend she had refused to hear it. He simply told the truth, which is the only thing he ever really knew how to do. And the gods were not angry. They were, if anything, impressed by his honesty on the road, and by the steadiness of the young woman who would not be moved even by heaven. But they were gods, and they had come a long way, and they were not yet quite ready to let the matter go without one small test. So, on the day of the Swayamvara, when Damayanti walked into the great hall to make her choice, she looked down the long shining line of kings and princes, and she saw not one Nala, but 5. For the 4 gods had each taken Nala's exact form. 5 identical men stood before her in the hall, the same face, the same shoulders, the same gentle, steady eyes, the same way of standing. 5 Nalas, and only one of them the man she loved, and no way, by looking, to tell which. Picture the hall as she stood there, the hundreds of pillars, wound with flowers, the lamps burning everywhere, throwing their warm and wavering light, the kings of the whole world seated in their ranks, in their silks and their gold, every eye upon her as she came in with the garland of choosing in her hands. And before her, in the place of honor, 5 men, identical, waiting, 5 times the face she loved, 5 times the shoulders, the eyes, the quiet, steady way of standing, and no sign, no mark, no smallest difference between any one of them and the others. For a moment she was lost. Her eyes went from one to the next, and they were the same, all the same. And her heart, which had been so certain, faltered. The whole great hall had gone silent, watching. Everyone there could see her difficulty. Everyone there understood now what the gods had done, that they had set the princess an impossible test, and that her famous certainty had come at last to a wall it could not see over. The kings leaned forward, the lamps burned on, and Damayanti stood alone in the center of all those watching eyes, with the garland trembling slightly in her hands, and 5 identical men before her, and her whole heart and her whole future resting on a choice she had no way, by looking, to make. And then Damayanti did the only thing left for her to do. She prayed. She did not weep, and she did not panic. She stood still in the center of that great hall, before all the kings of the world, and she prayed aloud, honestly, plainly, to the gods themselves. She told them that she had chosen Nala truly, in good faith, from the very first, before she had ever seen his face, that her love was real and not a girl's fancy, and she asked them, by the truth of her own faithful heart, to let her see which of the 5 was the true man, so that she could keep the promise she had made. And the gods were moved, for even the gods are moved by a true heart, perhaps especially the gods, and quietly they let their own nature show. Damayanti looked again, slowly now, down the line of 5 identical men, and now she saw what before she could not. 4 of the figures did not sweat in the warmth of the crowded hall. Their eyes did not blink. Their feet did not quite rest upon the floor. They hovered by the breadth of a hair just above it. They cast no shadow on the ground behind them, and the fresh flower garlands at their throats stayed cool and perfect and unwilting, as no flower stays in the heat of a crowded room. These 4 were the gods, and the 5th man stood with his 2 feet planted in the dust of the earth. His garland had begun, just slightly, to droop and to wilt in the warmth, as a real flower does. There was the faintest shine of nervousness upon his brow. His eyes blinked, and behind him, on the floor, in the lamplight, lay a shadow, a plain, ordinary human shadow. That one sweated, that one blinked, that one cast a shadow and stood in the dust and wore a wilting flower. That one was a man. That one was Nala. And Damayanti walked the length of the hall, past the 4 shining gods, straight to the one man. And she took up the cloth of choosing, the garland of choosing, and she laid it upon his shoulders before all the world. She had chosen, and the great hall let out its hell breath in a long murmur, like wind moving through a field. And the 4 gods, far from being angry, were glad, glad of her steadiness, and glad of his honesty on the road, and glad, perhaps, to have been refused by someone so worth refusing. And each of the 4 gave Nala a gift, a blessing to carry into his marriage. Indra gave him a sure place in the high heaven, in time, and a god's friendship. Agni, the lord of fire, gave him this, that Nala could call upon fire whenever he wished and commanded. Varuna, the lord of waters, gave him this, that Nala could call upon water whenever he wished and have it. And to these were added other gifts, that Nala's step would always find the right path, and, strangest of all, smallest of all, a touch of the divine in his cooking, so that food prepared by Nala's own hands would carry something of heaven in it. It seemed the least of the gifts, that one, a small and almost comic blessing. Hold on to it anyway. Long from now, in the dark middle of the story, that small gift will be the thread by which everything is found again. The gods blessed the couple, and rose, and went home to heaven. And Nala and Damayanti were married with great joy, and they went home together to the green country of Nishada. And for a long while, for years, They were as happy as two people have ever been. A son was born to them, and then a daughter. The rains came when they should. The country prospered under them. And in the evenings, the king and the queen walked together in the old gardens where a swan had once carried a message. And they were, both of them, no longer lonely and no longer lovesick, but simply, quietly, at home in their lives and in each other. If the story ended here, it would be a small and perfect thing, round and complete as a pearl. But it does not end here. It is a longer road than that, and a stranger one. So let the happiness of these years rest over you now, soft and warm, like a blanket drawn up in the night. And let me tell you, gently and without alarm, about the shadow that had been standing all this time at the edge of the firelight, waiting. Do you remember that the four gods traveled down from heaven to the Swayamvara? On their road home, going back up out of the world, they met two more spirits coming the other way, coming down, arriving late, hurrying toward Vidarbha for a choosing that was already over. One of these was a dark spirit named Kali. Now I must stop and say one thing clearly, so that there is no confusion as you drift. This Kali is not the goddess. This is not the great mother with her garland and her dark grace. This is a different being entirely, who happens to share the sound of that name. A male spirit, the spirit of the falling age, the spirit of strife and quarrels and bad luck and ruin and the slow decay of good things. He is the shadow that gathers in the corner of a golden time. And he had come, like the gods, hoping to win Damayanti for himself. When the four gods told him, there on the road, that the choosing was over, that the princess had already made her choice, and that she had chosen the mortal Nala over all of heaven, Kali was filled with a cold and bitter and patient anger. A mortal, he said. She passed over the gods themselves and chose a mortal man. Then I will ruin him. I will go to his kingdom, and I will wait, and I will enter into him, and I will take from him everything he has, his crown, his wealth, his peace, his wife, and I will not rest until he has lost it all. The gods warned him against it. They told him that Nala was good, truly good, not merely lucky, and that a good man is protected and not easily harmed, and not lightly ruined. And this was true. For here is the thing about that kind of dark spirit. It cannot simply walk into a good man as you might walk through an open gate. It has to wait. It has to find a flaw, a single careless moment, a single lapse, a single small door left ajar. Without that, it can only stand outside and watch and wait. So Kali went quietly down into the country of Nishada, and he waited, and he watched, and he waited a long, long time. This is the part of the story that is easy to forget because it is so quiet, but it is, in its way, the most patient and the most frightening part. Kali did not strike. He simply stayed. He stood at the edge of Nala's good life, year after year, the way a stone stands in a field through every season, unmoving, in no hurry, certain that its time would come. And Nala went on being a good king and a good husband and a careful, honorable man, and gave the dark spirit no opening at all. 1 year passed, 2, 5, 10, 12 years went by, 12 whole years, and still Kali found no way in, and still he waited, as patient as winter. And then, one evening, after 12 years, it came. It was the smallest thing. Nala, tired, perhaps hurried, perhaps simply human, performed his evening prayers without having first properly washed his feet. A tiny lapse in the careful ritual of the day, the kind of small carelessness that any tired on any ordinary evening might let slip without a second thought. It was nothing. It was almost nothing. But it was a door left open, the smallest crack of a door, left open for the smallest moment. And through it, in the space of a single breath, the dark spirit that had waited 12 years slipped quietly inside the king. Let that rest gently with you. and do not let it trouble your sleep, for it is only a story, and stories in the end find their way home, and so will this one, and so will you. But hold the truth of it for a moment, softly, the way you would hold something fragile, how patient ruin can be, how long it is willing to wait, and how small a door it needs, in the end, to come through. 12 years of patience for one unwashed evening. That is how these things go in the old tales. And that is where our story turns. Breathe now, slow and deep. The happy years are behind us. The long road begins. But remember, I have told you already, it ends well. It ends in a lighted room, with nothing lost. So you may follow the dark part without fear, or you may let it wash over you and slip down into sleep. And either way, all will be well. Once the dark spirit was inside him, Nala began slowly to change. It did not happen all at once. That is not how these things work. It began so gently that no one noticed, least of all Nala himself. It began with the dice. You remember that this was Nala's one small weakness, the game he had always loved, the harmless pleasure of a king. Now Kali, working quietly inside him, began to stir that small love into something else. He fanned it, the way you might breathe on a single ember until it catches and spreads. The pleasure became a need, the need became a hunger, and the hunger became a fever for the dice, for the throw, for the next throw, that gave Nala no rest. And it was just then, as if the world itself had tilted to help the dark spirit along, that Nala's brother came to him. His name was Pushkara, and he came to Nala with a challenge, a game of dice, brother against brother, for stakes. And Nala, who in all his life had never once been able to refuse a game, and who now, with Kali in him, could refuse it less than ever, agreed, and he began to lose. He lost the first throw, and then, to win it back, he staked more, and lost that too, and then more. There is a particular kind of madness in losing at a game of chance, a madness that everyone who has felt it will recognize, and it is this, that every loss makes you more certain, not less, that the next throw will set it right. So you stake more to win back what you have lost, and you lose that as well, and now you must stake more again. It is a pit that digs itself deeper the harder you try to climb out. And Nala, with the fever on him and the dark spirit guiding his hand, fell into that pit and could not climb out, and would not stop trying. Day after day he played. He staked gold and lost it. He staked his jewels and his fine things and lost them. He staked his chariots and then his horses, his beloved horses, the horses he understood better than any man alive, and he lost them too, and watched them led away, and still he played. The fever was on him, like a sickness, and he moved through it as a man moves through a bad dream, knowing somewhere that it is a dream, and unable, all the same, to wake himself up. The days blurred into one another. He hardly ate. He hardly slept. When he did sleep, he dreamed of the dice, of the throw, of the small bright hope of the next cast, and he woke wanting only to play again. The room where they played grew close and stale. The lamps burned down and were replaced and burned down again. Outside, the seasons turned, and the business of the kingdom went unattended, and the ministers wrung their hands, and the people grew afraid. But inside that room there was only the table, and the dice, and his brother's face across from him, and the terrible narrowing of his whole world down to the next throw, and the next, and the next. He had been a king who watched over a whole green country. Now he could not see past the edge of a gaming table. That is what the dark spirit had done to him. That is what the fever does. And all around him, the people who loved him tried to wake him. His ministers came and stood before him and begged him to leave the game, wise old men who had served his father, pleading with their king to stop. He did not hear them. The people of the city gathered outside the palace in crowds, and they wept, and they called out to him, the way you might call to someone walking in their sleep toward the edge of a roof. He did not hear them either, and Damayanti, gentle, steady Damayanti, came to him again and again, and tried, with all the love she had, to reach the man she knew was still somewhere beneath the fever. She spoke to him softly. She reminded him who he was. She did everything that love could think to do, but Kali held him fast, and Nala played on, and lost, and lost, and lost. Now Damayanti was wise, and she was brave, and she saw, sooner than anyone, exactly which way the long game was going. She could read the end of it from far off, the way you can feel a storm coming while the sky is still mostly blue. And her first thought, her clearest thought, was not for herself. It was for their two children, the little son and the little daughter, who had done nothing, and who would be swept away in the ruin that was coming. So quietly, while there was still time, Damayanti went to a charioteer she trusted above all others, a faithful man, and she gave her two children into his care, and she sent them away out of the falling kingdom, along the road to the west, to the safety of her father's house in Vidarbha, where they would be loved and kept far from the wreck of their father's fortune. She kissed them goodbye. She held them and let them go, and watched the chariot carry them away down the road and out of sight. And then she turned and went back into the palace, and stayed with her husband in the middle of the ruin, because that was the kind of love it was. She would not save herself and leave him. She sent the children to safety, and she remained, and the game went on, until there was, at last, nothing left. In the end, Nala staked the kingdom itself, the throne, the treasury, the land, the city, the whole green country of Nishada, on the dice, and he lost it. With a single tumble of the dice, an entire kingdom passed out of his hands and into his brothers. Everything Nala had ever had, everything his fathers had handed down to him, all of it was Pushkara's now. And Pushkara, flushed with the long winning, leaned forward for one final throw. One more, brother, he said. Stake Damayanti, stake your wife. Let us play for her. And at that one word, something deep in Nala surfaced for a moment through all the fever. Some last clean and unbroken thing that even the dark spirit had not been able to reach. And Nala would not. He said nothing. He did not answer his brother at all. He simply rose from the game. He took off his royal robes and his crown and his ornaments, and he laid them down. He put on a single plain cloth, the cloth of a poor man, and Damayanti, beside him, took off her own fine things and put on a single plain cloth too. And the two of them, who that morning had been a king and a queen, walked out of the palace that was no longer theirs, with nothing at all. Not a coin, not a jewel, not a second garment between them. They walked out into the open as the poorest two people in the kingdom they had ruled. And Pushkara, cruel in his victory, was not content to let them simply go. He sent word through the whole city, a hard, cold command, that no one was to help the fallen king. No one was to offer him food, or shelter, or water, or even a kind word, on pain of death. And so the people who loved Nala, who had wept for him outside the palace, could now only stand silent in their doorways and watch him pass, a king walking out of his own city in a beggar's cloth, with his wife beside him, into the empty country beyond the walls. They watched, and they grieved, and they did not dare to move. For 3 days and 3 nights, Nala and Damayanti stayed just outside the city, in the open, drinking only water, eating nothing at all, because no one dared bring them food. And then, on the 4th day, they rose, and they turned their backs on the city, and they walked away into the great forest that lay beyond. Walk a little way with them now, in your mind, into the cool green shade of the trees, along the soft and trackless ground, and then let them go on, and rest yourself. The worst of the road is just ahead, and after the worst it begins, so slowly you will hardly feel it, to turn back toward home. The forest closed gently over them, green and dim, and full of small sounds. It was an old forest, and a deep one. The trees rose up tall on every side, their trunks broad and dark, their high branches meeting overhead so that the light came down only in scattered coins and pools, green and gold, shifting as the wind moved the leaves far above. The floor of the forest was soft underfoot, deep with the fallen leaves of many years, and quiet so that their footsteps made almost no sound. Birds called somewhere out of sight, far off and then near. Small streams crossed their path, cold and clear, running over stones. Now and then the trees opened into a clearing full of light, where deer lifted their heads to watch the two strangers pass, and then bent again to their grazing, unafraid. It was a beautiful place, and a peaceful one, and it would have been a lovely thing to walk through on another day, in another life, with food in your pack and a home to walk back to. But they had no food and no home, and the beauty of the forest only made their hunger and their weariness the stranger and the harder to bear. They walked for a long time among the great trees, the two of them, hungry and footsore, and saying little. And then, in a clearing, Nala saw a flock of birds, beautiful birds, with feathers that shone like beaten gold in the broken light. He was starving by now, and his mind was not his own, and he thought, if I could catch even a few of these, we would eat. But he had nothing to catch them with. He had no net, no bow, no snare. He had only the single cloth he was wearing, and so, desperate and not thinking clearly, he took it off, and he threw it over the birds, like a net cast over water, and the birds rose into the air. They lifted up all together, beating their bright wings, and they carried the cloth up with them, snatched away into the sky. And as they rose, they called down to him, mocking, in thin bright voices that he would remember for the rest of his life. We are the dice, they called. We are the very dice you played with and lost. We have come to take from you the last thing you had, the last cloth off your back. And they flew up over the trees with his only garment trailing beneath them, and they were gone. So now Nala had nothing at all, not even a single cloth to cover himself. He stood naked and ruined in the clearing, a king who had lost a kingdom, and then lost even the rag he stood in. And Damayati, seeing it, said nothing unkind, and did not weep where he could see. She simply, quietly, drew her own single cloth around them both, so that the two of them shared the one piece of cloth between them, and they walked on, deeper into the forest, like that, together. Toward nightfall they came upon a small bare shelter at the edge of the path, one of those simple resting places that travelers built in the wild places in those days for one another. 4 posts and a roof and a bit of floor, and nothing more. And they lay down there, on the bare ground, in the dark. Damayanti was past the very end of her strength. She had walked all day, on no food, sharing one cloth, holding herself and her husband together by a will alone. And the moment she lay down, sleep took her. Deep, heavy, total sleep. The sleep of someone who has nothing left. But Nala could not sleep. Kali was working in him still, and now, in the dark, with his wife asleep beside him, the dark spirit turned his thoughts cruel. Look at her, the spirit whispered, from inside him, in his own voice, so that he could not tell it from his own thinking. Look what you have done to her. She was a princess. She had everything, and you have brought her to this, sleeping on bare ground in the wilderness, with nothing, sharing a beggar's rag. If she were free of you, She could go to her father's house. She could be safe. She could be a queen again. She would be better, the whisper said, without you. The kindest thing you could do, the only kind thing left, would be to set her free of you. It was a lie, of course. It was the particular lie that despair always tells, the oldest and the cruelest one, the lie that dresses up abandonment as kindness and calls running away a gift. You and I can hear that it is a lie, but Nala, hollowed out by the fever and the shame and the long ruin, could not hear it. He believed it, and there in the dark, weeping silently so as not to wake her, he did the worst thing he ever did in all his life. He found, somewhere, a blade, and gently, so gently, taking the greatest care not to wake her, he cut the single cloth that covered them both into two halves, half for her, to keep her covered, and half to wrap around himself. And then he sat for a long time, in the dark, and looked at her sleeping face, the face he had loved before he had ever seen it, the face that had chosen him out of 5, the face that had stayed beside him through every loss. He looked at it for a long, long time, and then he stood up, and he turned, and he walked away, and left her there, alone, asleep on the bare ground, with half a cloth. He did not get far. Twice he stopped. Twice he turned around and started back toward her, his whole heart pulling him to her side. And twice the dark spirit drove him on again. Back and forth he went, there at the dark edge of the clearing, a man torn exactly in two, half of him a loving husband who would have died before he hurt her, and half of him a thing possessed, a thing that wanted only to flee. Back and forth, his feet carrying him away and his heart dragging him back, until at last the possession won, as it had won at the dice, and he turned for the final time, and stumbled away into the black forest, and left his sleeping wife behind him. This is the lowest point of the whole story. It is dark, and it is sad, and there is no use pretending otherwise. But I have promised you, and I promise you again, it is not the end. It is nowhere near the end. The road bends from here, so let this dark hour pass through you gently, the way a sad scene passes in a film, when you already half know that the ending will be kind. You do not have to carry it. Let it go by. Breathe, and we go on. And from here, slowly, slowly, everything that was scattered begins, at last, to be gathered back. When Damayati woke in the grey light before dawn, she was alone. I will not linger over her first waking, except to tell you that she reached out in her sleep for the warmth that should have been beside her, and found only cold ground, and that she sat up and looked around the empty shelter and the empty clearing, and that she called his name once, and then again, into the silent trees, and that the forest gave her no answer at all. She was a king's daughter and a king's wife, and she was alone in the deep wilderness, with half a cloth and no husband, and no idea where he had gone or why. And for a while grief simply took her, completely, the way a great wave takes someone standing in shallow water. But here is the thing you must understand about Damayanti, the thing the whole rest of the story rests upon. She was not only gentle, she was strong in the deep, quiet, unshowy way that does not look like strength at all until the moment it is needed, and then turns out to be the strongest thing of all. And when the first great storm of her grief had spent itself, Damayanti did not lie down and give up. She stood up, she wiped her face, and she began to walk. And as she walked, she made herself a promise that she would live, and that she would find him, however long it took, wherever he had gone, and that she would not believe, whatever the evidence, that the man who had left her was truly the man she loved. She knew, somehow, even then, that something had taken him, and she set out to get him back. The forest tried her hard. It tried her again and again. A great serpent, thick as a tree and ancient, came upon her where she walked and seized her in its coils, and began to crush her, and she would have died there in the green dark, with no one ever knowing. But a passing hunter heard her cry and came and cut her free of the creature and saved her life. And then the hunter, looking at her, for even ragged and starved and filthy from the forest, she was beautiful, and beauty like hers does not hide. The hunter wanted her for himself and would not let her go, and reached for her. And Damayanti, who had been gentle all her life, who had never in her days wished harm on any living thing, found in herself in that moment a sudden, clean, terrible fire. For she had been faithful, utterly, perfectly faithful, in every thought, through everything. And there is a power in that kind of faithfulness, in the old stories, a power that can be called upon at need. She spoke a single word against the man, calling on the truth of her own faithfulness to witness and to act, and the hunter fell dead where he stood, struck down by her purity as by a thunderbolt. Even her goodness, you see, had become a kind of weapon for those who would harm her. She did not rejoice in it. She simply stepped past the fallen man and walked on. And she walked on and on, through wild and trackless country, past lions in the long grass that watched her and did not touch her, through dark groves where the light came down green and dim. She slept where she could, in the hollows of trees, in the lee of rocks. She ate what the forest gave her, roots and fruit and water from the streams. She grew thin and brown and ragged, and her hair grew wild, but her eyes did not change, and her purpose did not change, and she did not stop. She walked through long hot days, when the sun beat down through the thinning trees, and the air shimmered over the dry ground. She walked through cool green mornings when the mist still lay in the hollows, and the whole world was wet with dew. She walked through nights, sometimes, under stars so thick and bright that they lit her way, and she did not stop even then, because stopping was harder than walking, because when she stopped, the grief caught up with her, so she kept moving. And as she went, she talked sometimes aloud to Nala, as though he were walking just ahead of her in the trees, just out of sight, telling him she was coming, telling him she would not stop, telling him that whatever had taken him, whatever had made him leave, she forgave it, and she only wanted him back. The forest did not answer, but it did not need to. She was not really speaking to be answered. She was speaking to keep walking, and the days became weeks, and still she went on, and the country slowly changed around her, the deep forest giving way at last to more open land, to fields and tracks, and the first faint signs of people, a fence, a far-off plume of smoke, a path worn by feet other than her own. And at last, after many days, she came out of the deep forest and onto a road. And on the road she found a great caravan of merchants, a long, slow river of people and elephants and ox carts, crossing the country with their goods, raising a haze of dust into the evening light. And Damayanti joined them. She walked quietly at the edge of the great company, a strange and beautiful and silent woman in a torn half-cloth, whom no one quite understood and no one quite dared to question, and who asked nothing of anyone but to be allowed to walk along with them through the dangerous country. It was a comfort, after the long loneliness of the forest, simply to be among people again, to walk in the dust of the caravan and hear the ordinary sounds of it, the creak of the ox carts, the soft thud of the elephants' feet, the calling of the drivers, the talk and laughter of the merchants around their fires at night. She did not join in any of it. She kept to herself, at the edge, wrapped in her own quiet. But there was a kind of safety in the company of so many, and a kind of rest in the simple rhythm of the road, rising at dawn, walking through the day, stopping at dusk, sleeping, rising again. For days the great slow river of the caravan wound across the country, and Damayanti walked with it, and let it carry her, and watched the land go by, and waited to see where it would take her. And in time the caravan came to a city, the city of the Chedi people, a great and prosperous and ancient city with high walls and crowded markets and tall houses and temples, and a king's palace rising above it all. After the empty forest and the long road, the noise and the color of it were almost overwhelming. The press of people, the cries of the sellers, the smells of cooking and flowers and dust, the sheer bright crowded life of a great city going about its business. And it was here, in the middle of all this teeming life, that Damayanti's long wandering at last came to a pause. For the queen mother of that city, an old and kind woman, happened to be standing on her high terrace as the caravan came in, looking down idly at the crowd in the street below. And among all the travelers, her eye was caught and held by the strange woman in the torn cloth, by something in the way she stood, the way she carried herself, a grace that all the rags and the dust and the weariness could not quite hide. That is no ordinary wanderer, the old queen thought, and she sent her servants down to bring the woman up to her. And so Damayanti was taken into the women's quarters of the palace of the Chedi, and given clean clothes and food and a place, and she became a serving woman there, a companion to the queen mother, unknown, unrecognized, her true name and rank a secret she kept folded away inside her, a queen living as a servant, but safe now, sheltered at last after the long forest, and waiting and watching the road every day for any word of a lost king. Let her rest there a while, sheltered and safe, and rest yourself now as deeply as she is resting. The hardest part of her long road is behind her. From here, the threads begin to draw together. Now we must leave Damayanti safe in the city of the Chedi and go back and follow Nala, who was wandering too, somewhere far off, alone, in the same wide and trackless world. One day, going through the deep forest, half-starved, hardly a king any longer, Nala heard a voice calling out for help. He stopped and listened and followed the sound, and he came to a place where a fire was burning, a great fire, ringed about by the trees, crackling and roaring and throwing up sparks. And in the very middle of the fire, trapped, unable to escape the flames, lay a great serpent. It was no ordinary snake. It was a Naga, one of the serpent people, a king among them, and his name was Karkotaka. And the serpent called out to Nala from the heart of the fire. King Nala, it called, for the serpent knew him, even now, even ruined. Do not pass by. Carry me out of this fire, and I will repay you. I will do you a greater service than you can guess. And Nala, who even now, even with nothing, even half out of his mind with grief and the fever, could not pass by a creature in pain, stepped into the smoke and the heat. He found the serpent and lifted it up and carried it out of the flames, step by careful step, counting his paces as he went, until he had borne it clear and set it down on the cool earth beyond the fire. And the moment Nala set him down, the serpent bit him. It seems a poor reward, does it not, for a man who has just saved your life, to bite him? And Nala must have thought so too, in that first startled instant. But it was not a poor reward at all. It was a mercy, two mercies in fact, both of them wearing the disguise of harm, which is a thing that happens more often in this world than we like to think. For the venom of Karkotaka did two things. First, it went straight to the dark spirit, to Kali, who was still hiding and working inside Nala, and it burned him. The poison was agony to the spirit, a torment he could not escape, so that from that very hour Kali could no longer rest easy inside the king he had ruined. He began, slowly, to suffer, and slowly his grip began to loosen. And second, the venom changed Nala's body. As Nala stood there, the bite working in him, his tall and beautiful form began to shrink and to alter. His straight back bent, his fine features grew plain and coarse. In moments, he was transformed into a short, unhandsome, unremarkable little man. A man no one in all the world would ever look at twice. A man no one would ever take for a king. It was a disguise, and a perfect one, the most perfect of all disguises, because it was not a mask he had to hold in place or a cloak he had to keep from slipping. It was his own body. It was a hiding place he could carry with him everywhere, on his own skin, and never fear that it would fail. "Do not be afraid," said the serpent, seeing his alarm. "I have done this for your protection. In this form, no one will know you. And that is exactly what you need for a while. Now listen, and I will tell you what to do. Go to the city of Ayodhya. There rules a king named Rituparna, and he is a master of a great secret, the secret of dice, the very heart of the game, the knowledge of numbers and chances that you have never had. Go to him. Offer yourself as his charioteer and the keeper of his horses, under another name. Teach him your secret, the secret of horses, which no man knows as you do. And in return, he will teach you his secret, the secret of dice. And on the day when you wish to be yourself again, to wear your own form once more, put on these garments that I give you, and remember me, and think of me, and your own shape will return to you." And the serpent gave Nala 2 shining garments, divine things, and folded them into his hands. And then Karkotaka was gone, slipped away into the forest, and Nala stood alone, a small, plain stranger in the green light, holding 2 magic cloths and a long road's worth of advice. So Nala did as the serpent had said. He set off through the world toward the city of Ayodhya, a long journey on foot, a small, plain stranger on the roads, unremarkable now, unrecognized by anyone, passing through villages and towns where once, as a tall and shiny, he would have been known and honored, and where now no one gave him a second glance. There was a strange and bitter freedom in it. No one expected anything of him. No one knew his grief. He was no one, going nowhere that mattered to anyone. And he walked the long miles alone with his thoughts and his sorrow and the 2 divine garments folded away and hidden against his skin. And he came at last to the great city of Ayodhya and to the court of King Rituparna, and he offered himself as a charioteer and a keeper of horses, calling himself now by another name, Bahuka. And because no one in all the world could handle horses as Nala could, even in this small, changed body, even with these short, plain hands, the king took him gladly into his service, and Bahuka settled into the stables of Ayodhya, a quiet, ugly, unremarkable little man, with an uncanny gift for horses, and a strange skill at cooking, and a way of keeping to himself. And no one in that whole city ever guessed that a lost king was hiding inside him, waiting for his grip on the secret of dice, waiting for the dark spirit to weaken and let go, waiting, though he hardly dared to name it even to himself, for some word, some sign, some impossible thread that might lead him back to the wife he had left sleeping in the forest. 2 people then, 2 lost royals, in 2 distant cities, a world apart, both of them in disguise, both of them serving quietly in another's house, both of them, though neither knew it of the other, waiting. Let them both wait, safe for now, and let your own thoughts grow slow and soft and still. The threads are nearly touching now. In the next part of the story, against all the odds of the wide world, they begin to find each other. Far away in Vidarbha, Damayati's father, King Bhima, had never for one day stopped grieving for his lost daughter. He did not know if she was alive or dead. He knew only that his child had walked out of a fallen kingdom into the wilderness, and that no word of her had come since. And so he did what a loving and powerful father could do. He sent searchers out across the whole wide world. He gathered brahmanas, learned men, trustworthy men who could travel safely anywhere and be received in any court, and he sent them out in every direction, into every city and every kingdom with a description of his daughter and a father's plea, telling them to look everywhere, to leave no place unsearched, and to come back to him the very moment they found any trace of her at all. And the searchers went out, and they searched for a long time and found nothing. The world is very wide, and a single woman in it is very small. But one of these searchers, a thoughtful and patient man named Sudeva, came at last in his wanderings to the city of the Chedi, and he was received in the palace there as traveling brahmanas were. And one day, in the women's quarters, he saw a serving woman go by, and something in him went very still. For though she was thin and plainly dressed and dimmed by sorrow, and though she went about her tasks like any servant, Sudeva knew her. He had known Damayanti long ago in her father's court, in the days of her glory, and he knew her now beneath all the change, the way you know an old friend across a crowded room before you have consciously recognized them. And to be quite certain, he looked for a particular thing, a small natural mark she had carried since birth, a faint mark like a lotus between her brows that no hardship and no disguise could ever erase. And there it was, quietly, gently, so as not to frighten her. Sudeva went to her, and he spoke her name. He spoke her father's name, and her mother's, and the name of her lost city. And Damayanti, hearing those names spoken aloud for the first time in so long, those names she had kept folded away in secret, the names of everyone she had lost, Damayanti wept. She wept the way you weep when something you had given up for gone is suddenly, impossibly returned to you. And the queen mother of the Chedi, learning now that her strange and graceful serving woman was in truth a lost princess, and, as it turned out, her own kinswoman besides, a relation by blood, embraced her and wept over her too, and would not hear of her being a servant another hour. She had Damayanti, dressed and honored as the princess she was, and she sent her home with an escort and every kindness back to Vidarbha, back to her father and her mother and her two children, who had been kept safe there all this long while, and who had been waiting and waiting for their mother to come home. So Damayanti was home. After everything, she was home. But she was only half home, because half of her heart was still lost, somewhere out in the wide world. Her husband Nala, who had vanished into the forest and was not found, who might be anywhere, who might be alive or dead, and whom she could not, would not, give up for lost. She had her children again, and her parents, and her safety, and her name, and still she could not rest, not while he was out there somewhere, alone. So Damayanti, who was as clever as she was faithful, set her own searchers out, and she gave them a clever errand, an errand shaped exactly to catch the particular kind of man her husband was. She gathered brahmanas, and she sent them out across the world as her father had done. But she told them to do a special thing. In every court they came to, in every hall where everyone could hear, they were to speak aloud a particular set of words, a small riddle of grief, a lament. It was the lament of a wife for the husband who had left her sleeping in the forest and cut away half her cloth and gone. She told them, "Go everywhere, into every kingdom, and speak these words aloud in each one, and then watch the faces, and if anyone, anywhere, answers these words strangely, if anyone replies to them as though the words mean something to him, as though they cut him, then mark that man, and remember where he is, and bring me word at once." And the brahmanas went out, scattering in every direction, carrying Damayanti's riddle of grief across the whole world, speaking it in hall after hall, and watching, always watching, the faces of the men who heard it. We are close now, very close. 2 cities, 2 disguises, and a riddle, traveling between them, looking for the one heart in all the world that it would fit. Stay with me just a little longer, soft and slow and unhurried. For here's the part where, at last, they begin to find each other. One of Damayanti's Brahmanas came, at last, in his wanderings, to the great city of Ayodhya, to the very court of King Rituparna, where a small plain charioteer named Bahuka kept the horses. And there, in the hall, as he had done in 100 halls before, the Brahmana spoke Damayanti's words aloud, the quiet lament of the wife left sleeping in the forest, with half her cloth cut away. He spoke it to the room, and watched the faces, as he had been told. And from somewhere near the doorway, from among the servants, a small, ugly charioteer answered him. He answered quietly, almost to himself, in words of his own, words that begged forgiveness for a man who had not done what he did of his own will, words about a man who had been possessed, who had been driven, who had wronged the one person he loved most in all the world, and had not had a single peaceful hour since. Words full of a grief so particular, so exactly shaped to the wound in the riddle, that they fit it the way a key fits a lock that was carved for it alone. The little charioteer's answer was strange and broken and full of pain, and it answered Damayanti's question completely. The Brahmana said nothing, but he marked the man, and he marked the place, and he hurried home to Vidarbha as fast as he could travel. And he told Damayanti everything: the city, the king, the small, plain, ugly charioteer named Bahuka, and the answer he had given to the words. And Damayanti's heart leapt, and pounded, because she understood at once what it meant. The body was wrong. The man the Brahmana described was small, and plain, and ugly, nothing like her tall and beautiful Nala. But the heart inside that strange body, the grief in it, the exact and particular grief, the guilt of a man driven to do what he could never have chosen, that was Nala's. That was Nala's heart, beating inside a stranger's shape. She was almost certain of it. Almost. But almost was not enough. She had to be sure. And more than that, she had to bring him to her, across the whole width of the world. And Ayodhya was very, very far from Vidarbha. So Damayanti made a plan. It was a bold plan, and a clever one, and, it must be said, a little bit cruel, though every bit of the cruelty in it was made out of love. She sent a single message to King Rituparna of Ayodhya, and the message announced that the Princess Damayanti, believing now that her lost husband Nala would never be found, had decided at last to choose a new husband, to hold a second Swayambara, a second choosing, and that it would be held the very next morning, at dawn. Now, consider what that meant. Vidarbha was so far from Ayodhya that no horse and no chariot and no rider in all the world could possibly cover the distance between them in a single day. It simply could not be done. To leave Ayodhya now and arrive in Vidarbha by dawn was, by every ordinary reckoning, impossible. By every ordinary reckoning. But King Rituparna very much wished to go. The famous Damayanti, choosing a husband tomorrow. He longed to be there, to try for her hand. And he had, in his own stables, a charioteer who was, though the king had no idea of it, the single greatest driver of horses who had ever lived. So King Rituparna sent for Bahuka, and he asked him, plainly, "Can it be done? Can you drive me to Vidarbha, all that impossible distance, by tomorrow's dawn?" And Nala, hearing in those few words that his Damayanti believed him gone and meant to marry another man, and that he had a single night to reach her, Nala felt his heart go cold and still and strange inside him. But he said only this. "Yes," he said, "I can drive you there. Let us go at once." And he went out to the stables, and he chose his horses. He passed over the proud and glossy ones that any other man would have chosen, and he chose instead 4 lean, plain, unlikely horses that the other grooms thought far too thin and tired to run, because Nala, who knew the hearts of horses as no one else did, could see the great hearts hidden in these 4, the deep endurance that did not show on the outside. He harnessed them with his own hands, speaking to them softly, and he climbed up, and he took the reins, and the king climbed up beside him, and they went, and the chariot flew. It went like the wind. It went like a thought, like a thing in a dream, like nothing the king had ever felt or imagined. The country streamed away beneath the wheels, the hills, the rivers, the forests, the long plains, all of it pouring past and behind them, faster and faster. The four lean horses running not as though they were tired, but as though they had been waiting all their lives to run like this, as though running were the thing they had been born for. King Rituparna clung to the rail of the chariot, his hair streaming back, amazed past speaking, watching the whole world blur and fly. And what a thing it was to see, that ride, if anyone had been standing in the fields to see it pass. The chariot came on like a low star, like a streak of light along the road, the dust rising behind it in a long pale plume that hung in the still evening air for miles. Villagers looked up from their work as it passed, and it was already gone before they could point. Birds startled up out of the wayside trees in its wake. The four horses ran with their heads low and their manes streaming, their hoofs hardly seeming to touch the road at all, their breath coming deep and steady and even, mile after mile after mile, not flagging, not faltering, running as horses run, only in old stories. And Nala, small and plain and ugly in his borrowed body, but a king again in his hands and his heart, sat easy at the front of it all, the reins light between his fingers, his eyes on the road ahead, driving the way only he and all the world could drive, drawing out of those four tired animals a speed that no one had ever seen and no one would ever see again. The sun went down ahead of them as they flew west, the whole sky turning to gold and then to rose, and then to a deep and quiet blue, and still they ran, on into the gathering dusk. Hills rose up before them and fell away behind. Rivers flashed silver beneath the wheels and were gone. Whole forests came and went in the time it takes to draw a breath. And through all of it the king sat marveling, and the horses ran, and the lost king drove them home, every turn of the wheels carrying him closer to the one place in all the world he most longed for and most feared to reach. And on that wild ride, in the rush and the roar of it, a small thing happened that turned out to be the largest thing of all. The king's shawl slipped from his shoulders in the wind, and he called out to Bahuka to stop, just for a moment, to let him fetch it back. But by the time the words were even out of his mouth, the chariot had already flown so far beyond the fallen shawl that it was hopeless. It lay a great distance behind them already, lost on the road. The king saw then, truly, how impossibly fast they were going, and marveling, wanting somehow to answer such a wonder with a wonder of his own, King Rituparna pointed to a great spreading tree that they were rushing past, and he told Bahuka in a single instant exactly how many leaves and how many fruits hung upon all its branches, naming the uncountable in the blink of an eye, counting in a heartbeat what would take an ordinary man a lifetime. For this was Rituparna's own great gift, the secret he carried, the secret of numbers, of counting, of chance, the very heart of the game of dice. And Nala was astonished, and he asked the king, almost trembling, to teach him this secret, this knowledge of numbers and of dice. And there, flying across the whole world in a chariot pulled by four tireless horses, the two men traded their secrets at last, each giving the other the great gift he had carried alone. Rituparna gave Nala the secret of dice and of numbers, and Nala gave Rituparna, in return, the secret of horses. And in the very instant that the secret of dice passed into Nala and took root in him, the dark spirit could hold on no longer. Kali, who had been burning all this time from the serpent's venom, tormented and weakened, Kali was driven out. Nala felt him go. He felt the long fever break inside him at last, the way a true fever breaks in the night and leaves you suddenly clear and cool and weak and wholly yourself again. He felt the dark thing that had ridden him for so long let go its grip and leave and pour out of him like a held breath finally released. The spirit, beaten and tormented and cast out, begged Nala's forgiveness as it went and slunk away into the world and troubled him no more. And from that hour, Nala was free, free at last, after everything, and more than free, for now he carried in him the secret of dice, which meant that he need never lose at that game again as long as he lived. He was free, and he was whole, and he was himself again inside, though still, for now, he wore the small plain body of Bahuka, still hidden, still unrecognized, as the chariot raced on through the last of the daylight, toward Vidarbha, and toward her. Feel that, now, as you drift down toward sleep, the long fever finally breaking, the dark thing finally leaving, the road after all this time. But there is not far to go now, not far at all, for them or for you. The chariot reached Vidarbha by nightfall, a thing that no one in the world had believed could be done, and the whole city heard it come, for there is no hiding a chariot driven like that. The thunder of those wheels rolled into the city ahead of the chariot itself, and people came to their doors to hear it, that strange, unmistakable thunder, the sound of a chariot driven faster and finer than any chariot had a right to be driven. And Damayanti, listening from the women's quarters of her father's palace, heard that sound, and her heart turned over inside her, because there was only one man alive who had ever driven a chariot with that particular thunder, that particular rolling rhythm that she had known and loved across all the years of her life. She did not see him. She only heard the wheels, and already, on the strength of that sound alone, she began to hope so hard it hurt. But Damayanti was careful. She had been fooled by appearances once before, long ago. 5 identical Nalas standing in a hall, and no way to tell the true one by looking. She would not let herself be fooled now, not by hope, not by a sound. So she did not run out to the chariot. Instead, she watched, and she tested, gently, quietly, one careful thing at a time. She sent her handmaid to observe the strange little charioteer who had driven the king of Ayodhya across the world, and the maid came back with wonders to report. When the small ugly man needed water, the maid said, the vessel seemed to fill at his very glance. When he needed fire, fire seemed to come to his hand of its own accord. When he took up dry, withered grass and held it, it grew green and fresh again between his fingers. And when he cooked, the maid had never tasted anything like it. The food was finer than any cook in the whole palace could make, as though it carried some touch of heaven in it. And Damayanti, listening, knew, because these were the gifts. These were the very gifts that the 4 gods had given Nala at his wedding so many years ago, in another life: the command of water, and the command of fire, and the right path always under his feet, and the divine touch in his cooking. The body was a stranger's, small and plain and ugly, but the gifts were Nala's. The gifts were Nala's and no one else's in all the world. Do you see now why I asked you, long ago, to hold on to that smallest and strangest of the wedding gifts, the touch of heaven in his cooking? Here it is again, here at the very end. That small forgotten gift becomes one of the threads by which he is known and found. But still Damayanti made certain she had one more test, and it was the surest of all. She sent out her 2 children, the little son and the little daughter she had sent to safety so long ago, who were growing up now in their grandfather's house. She sent them out to where the strange charioteer could see them, walking together. And when Bahuka saw the 2 children, the boy and the girl, he caught them up in his arms, both at once, and held them, and wept over them, and could not let them go. For a stranger would have seen only 2 royal children, but this small, plain, ugly man knew his own son and his own daughter at a single glance, across all the years, through all the disguise, and his heart broke open at the sight of them, and he wept. Now Damayanti was sure enough to act. She sent for him, and the small, plain, unhandsome man came and stood before her, this princess whom he had left sleeping in a forest, half a world and half a lifetime ago. And for a long moment, neither of them could speak at all. Then she asked him, quietly, with all the old grief gathered into the question, how a man who had truly loved his wife could ever have left her sleeping alone in the wilderness, with half a cloth and gone. And Bahuka, weeping again now, answered her with the truth. He told her that it had not been him, not truly, that a dark spirit had entered him and ruled him against everything he was, against everything he wanted, that he had been possessed when he left her, that he had grieved every single day in all the years since, and that the man who had walked away from her in the dark was not the man who stood before her now. For that man, the possessed man, was gone, cast out at last, and only Nala remained. And then Nala remembered the serpent's gift. He took out the 2 divine garments that Karkataka had given him so long ago in the burning forest, and he put them on, and he remembered the serpent, and thought of him as he had been told to do. And the small, plain, ugly body fell away from him like a shed cloak, like a shadow burned off by the sun. And there, before Damayanti, stood Nala, her Nala, tall and bright and beautiful, exactly as he had been on the long ago day when she chose him out of 5, exactly as she had carried him in her heart through all the dark years between. And there was a moment, you can imagine it, you can feel it, when neither of them moved at all, when the whole world seemed to hold still around the 2 of them. All the long road that had brought them to this room, the swan in the garden, the choosing, the dark spirit, the dice, the forest, the parting in the night, the serpent, the disguise, the years of searching, the riddle, the chariot that flew faster than the wind, all of it gathered and narrowed down to this single still point, a man and a woman standing face to face at last, in the lamplight after everything. And then they came together, and the long, long separation, all the forests, all the cities, all the years, all the miles, all the grief. And Damayanti told him the truth of the second Swayambara, that there had never been any other man, that she had never for one moment meant to marry anyone else, that it had all been a trick, the only trick she could think of clever enough to draw him across the whole width of the world to her side, because she had known, you see, that no horse on earth but Nala's own could ever make that journey in a single day. And so if any chariot came thundering into Vidarbha by dawn, it could only be driven by him. The false choosing had been a net, woven of her certainty about the one thing in the world she knew best, the man she loved, and it had caught him and brought him home. And to put away any last shadow of doubt about her own faithfulness through all the years apart, Damayanti called upon the wind itself to bear witness, the wind that goes everywhere and sees everything, that she had been true to Nala in every thought through every day of the long separation. And the wind answered. A voice spoke out of the air before them all, declaring that she had indeed been faithful, perfectly faithful in all things. And a soft rain of blessing fell, and all of Vidarbha rejoiced. Her father wept for joy this time, and not for grief. Her mother held her. The 2 children clung to their father's knees. Their father returned at last and made whole and beautiful again. And the 2 of them, the king and the queen, the 2 who had loved each other before they had ever met, who had been given to one another by a swan and torn apart by a game of dice, and brought back together by a riddle and a chariot that flew faster than the wind. The 2 of them were, at last, after everything, simply together again, in the light, with nothing hidden, with nothing any longer lost. Let yourself rest in that now, wherever you have drifted to. The lost are found. The long dark road has ended in a warm and lighted room. There is only the gentlest part of the story left to tell. Only one thing now remained undone. For Nala still had no kingdom. While he had wandered the world in disguise, his brother Pushkara had sat upon the throne of Nishada, the throne he had won at dice, in the dark, from a good man who had not been himself. So, after a while, after they had rested and been reunited, and let the first great joy of it settle into something quieter and deeper, Nala made ready to go home to Nishada. And this time, he was not afraid of the game. He went to his brother Pushkara, and he challenged him once more to a throw of the dice. "Stake everything you have won from me," Nala said. "The throne, the treasury, the kingdom, all of it. And I will stake all that is left to me. One game, a single game, and the winner takes everything." And Pushkara, who had no idea that his ruined brother now carried within him the very secret of the dice, the heart of the game itself, Pushkara laughed and agreed at once, certain that he would win again, as he had won before. But the fever was gone now, and the dark spirit was gone. And in the place where they had been, there was now only knowledge. Clear, calm, patient, unbeatable knowledge. They played, and Nala won. He won, in a single game, everything that had been lost in all those long ago games. The throne, the treasury, the land, the city, the whole green country of Nishada, all of it flowing back into his hands as easily and as naturally as water finding its own level and returning to the sea. And here, at the very end, the story does the kindest and the most surprising thing of all. Having won back everything, his crown, his kingdom, his whole world, Nala did not punish his brother. He looked at Pushkara, who had been so cruel, who had stripped him bare and cast him out, and forbidden the whole city to give him so much as a cup of water or a kind word, who had tried to make him stake his own wife. Nala looked at all of that, and he forgave him. "It was not truly you," Nala said to his brother, in effect, "any more than it was truly me. We were both moved by the same dark spirit. The thing that ruined me whispered also to you. Let it go. Go in peace, brother. Live. Be well." And he sent Pushkara away unharmed, with honor, with his life and his own portion of wealth intact, asking nothing of him but that he go and live in peace. For Nala had learned, in the long hard school of the road, exactly how it feels to be ridden by a darkness you did not choose. And so, of all men, he was the one who could forgive it in another. And then Nala took up his throne again, and Damayanti came home to Nishada as its queen once more, and their 2 children came home with them, to the country their father ruled. And the people of Nishada, who had stood so long ago, silent and weeping in their doorways, forbidden to help their king as he walked away into the wilderness, the people came out now into the streets, in crowds, to welcome their king home. And the rains came when they should, and the country, which had suffered under a crown won by cruelty, healed slowly and surely under the hands of the king who had come home. And Nala and Damayanti, who had been given to each other by a swan and torn apart by a game of dice, and reunited by a riddle and a chariot that flew faster than the wind, lived out their long lives together from that day on, in the light and in peace, with their children around them, with nothing hidden between them any longer, and nothing ever again lost. That is the story of Nala and Damayanti. It is one of the oldest love stories in the world, and like the oldest and best of them, it tells you a quiet and a hopeful thing, that what is lost can be found, that the darkness that takes us is not, in the end, the truth of who we are, and that love, the patient and faithful kind, the kind that keeps walking and keeps searching and will not give up, is stronger than any run of bad luck, and stronger than the longest separation, and able in the end to bring even the most lost of us home. And there our story rests, for tonight. Let it fade gently now. There is nothing to hold on to and nothing to remember. Let the king and the queen go quietly on into their long happy years, and let yourself stay here in the warm dark, with your body grown heavy and your breath slow and easy. There is nothing more to do now, nowhere you need to be, nothing left to follow. Sleep well, and we will meet again with another old story from the Mahabharata whenever you're ready. Good night.